without further ado, I'm very happy to give Ms. Karine Kanimba the floor for about 10 minutes.
Chers membres de la Commission, je vous remercie de m'avoir invité à...
Members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to speak here before you today.
Je m'appelle Karine
My name is Karine Kanimba. I'm 29 years old. I'm the youngest of 6 children of Paul and Tatiana Rusesabagina. I am a Belgian and American citizen. I grew up between Europe and the United States, and until 2 years ago, I had a job that I loved in finance, working in New York. In August 2020, everything changed. Exactly 766 days, my father was lured when traveling from our family home in San Antonio, Texas, to Burundi. He was kidnapped in Dubai by a illegal operation from the Rwanda secret services and was transported illegally to Kigali in a private jet that was chartered directly by the office of the Rwandan president. My father was then subject to forced disappearance. He was tortured before reappearing and being subject to a sham trial, at the end of which he was unjustly sentenced to 25 years in prison. The Belgian government, the American government, the United Nations, and numerous human rights organizations have designated my father as being arbitrarily detained in Rwanda. In February and October 2021, the European Parliament passed 2 resolutions in favor of my father and called for his immediate release. Our family is extremely grateful to all of you, members of the European Parliament, for leading the efforts for this resolution. In 2021, I became victim of the Pegasus spyware. If I may, I'd like to take a few moments to tell you about my journey and how I ended up being a victim of this software. I was born in Rwanda a few months before the 1994 genocide, the genocide which made me an orphan. My biological parents were among the 1 million people killed during that genocide, leaving my sister Anaïs and myself orphans. I was only 11 months old at the time. During the genocide, Paul Rusesabagina was the manager of a hotel in Kigali. During this dark period in Rwanda's history, 1,268 people came to seek refuge in his hotel, and for almost 3 months my father put his own life at risk to protect these people against the militiamen and the military who came every day to look for people to kill. Thanks to my father's interventions, none of the people who took refuge in the hotel were killed or were taken away. Their lives were saved. At the end of the genocide, Paul and his wife Tatiana heard that our parents had been killed. They searched for Anaïs and myself and found us in a refugee camp. Then they raised us and loved us as their own children. And we became that along with my other brothers and sisters, Lise, Roger, Diane and Trésor. My big sisters Lise and Diane are here today with me. We stayed in Rwanda for a few months after the genocide. But sometime later, my father was victim of assassination attempts in Rwanda and took the decision to seek refuge in Belgium for our family because we would be safer there. Throughout all of those years, we found the protection that we were looking for here in Brussels at the heart of the European Union. In 2004, this story was shown in the film Hotel Rwanda, and my father's name became known all over the world as a man of peace and virtue. In 2005, he was awarded the US Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. My father used the attention he received to help others. He encouraged peace and dialogue and called on the world not to ignore the suffering of people who were victims of the atrocities in the Great Lakes of Africa region. He criticized the numerous human rights violations that were perpetrated by the Rwandan regime, calling out loudly for democracy, freedom of expression and of the press, and truth and reconciliation for all Rwandans. It's by defending these beautiful values that we enjoy here in Europe, and of which you are the guarantors, that he became a target of the Rwandan president Paul Kagame. For many years, the Rwandan regime tried to silence my father through a targeted, brutal campaign trying to discredit him. There were assassination attempts against my father in Belgium, there were burglaries and break-ins in our house in Brussels, and there were intimidation attempts. But my father was never intimidated because he knew that he had a responsibility to use his platform, to use the platform that he had been given to be the voice of people who were silenced by decades of dictatorship. However, the Rwandan government still managed to kidnap, torture, and imprison him, and then to convict him on the basis of fabricated charges, as they have done with many other people who criticized the government. Just as my father was a victim of the Rwandan regime, I too became a target at the same time that I was pleading with all of you to save my father's life. In February 2021, I was contacted by a collective of journalists called Forbidden Stories, who work with Amnesty International and Citizen Lab on the Pegasus process. Their research on Rwanda and Pegasus gave them reason to believe I was being spied on. I provided my phone for forensic analysis. I agreed to do that, and it showed that Pegasus surveillance had been used to target me. I was terrified. To understand why I was so frightened, you have to understand or imagine what would be happening now if Pegasus was on my phone. The Rwandan government would hear everything going on in this room. They could film us without us knowing, without us even knowing that the camera was on. They could see all of my emails and messages, hear all my calls, and even private conversations with my lawyers. Basically, they would be able to track my each and every movement and word. The scariest part is that they put it on my phone without me having to click on any links. This is using technology that costs millions of dollars, and the Rwandan government considered me to be a worthwhile target. Here, sitting before you today, I've lost all sense of security in my private actions and in my physical surroundings. The forensics reports have been presented to this committee, and the Belgian intelligence have confirmed these reports through their own analysis. For instance, in June 2021, I was received by the Belgian Minister of Foreign Affairs in her office at the ministry. The reports show that the spyware was activated during my meeting with the minister, from the moment I entered her office until the moment I left. Throughout that time, the Rwandan government was listening to our whole meeting. It was active during my exchanges with a number of you, members of the European Parliament, as well as when I spoke in front of human rights organisations or with journalists. While I was having exchanges with all of you by email about the resolutions that you passed to secure my father's release in 2021, the Rwandan government was also spying on you. This surveillance is illegal under European law and has allowed the Rwandan government, the same individuals who abducted and tortured my father, to turn around and now target his children. 70% of Rwanda's national expenditure comes from foreign aid. In your resolution of October the 7th, 2021 on my father's case, you asked the Commission to critically review the European Union's assistance to the Rwandan government and to Rwandan public institutions in order to ensure that they fully promote human rights and do not negatively impact freedom of expression and association, or political pluralism, respect for the rule of law, or an independent civil society. Nevertheless, the EU has pledged €260 million to fund Rwanda over a 4-year period. Rwanda is considered as an EU ally and a partner in multiple areas, including military and intelligence. European taxpayers and you, members of the European Parliament, deserve to know that the government of Rwanda is spending humanitarian aid to finance the kidnapping of a democracy activist from US soil and using military-grade technology to survey his daughter, working for his release. 3 years ago, my cousin Jean-Paul Nzanzerumpa's phone was also infected with Pegasus. He is a Belgian citizen. For 2 years, he and I have been living in the same house here in Belgium. There are 2 phones now in the same house, targeted by the same software, by the same authoritarian regime. I'm frightened by what the Rwandan government could do to me and my family. A few months ago, Citizen Lab discovered that the phone I'd taken as a replacement for the first one also had traces of the Pegasus software. Nothing can guarantee that this telephone isn't also infected. It keeps me awake at night to know that they knew everything I was doing, where I was, who I was speaking to, my private thoughts and actions, and they could know that any time they wanted to. Unless there are consequences for countries and their enablers who abuse this technology to hurt innocent people, none of us is safe. I'm very grateful, once again, to have this opportunity to share my story and that of my father. I hope you found it useful and that you'll be able to find ways to help both my father's cause and to help him address this type of illegal activity. I promise you that we will never stop advocating for my father, Paul Rusesabagina, as long as he is not at home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us today. Also a welcome to your family that has been invited today to join us here today. It's a very impressive account. Your story, the fears you have, the sense that you lost all sense of security is something that, unless you have experienced this, I think you will never be able to imagine what it does to you. And with your story that you presented so eloquently here today, at least we can get a little bit more of a feeling for what it means to you and to all those other victims of this kind of spyware. And I'm really grateful for you for being with us today and sharing that. And I'm sure there's plenty of members who will also have questions to ask you when we go to the Q&A, but I think the round of applause that you got here was very heartfelt and also shows the appreciation of all of us for your presence and participation here today. So thank you very much. And you'll get plenty of opportunity also to respond to colleagues in the House in the Q&A. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your remarks, and thank you for the question as well. I do not feel safe. So the reality is that my life has completely changed. Not only as I have to continue to be public and to voice everything because my father is currently wrongfully detained, and our advocacy is even what's allowing him to continue to stay alive. But my life has entirely changed, and I cannot be quiet because this is how we'll get him home. In terms of the Belgians' approach, I'm grateful for the work, the forensics report that they've conducted on my phone. However, I do believe there needs to be more done to protect us and our family. As I mentioned in my statement, my father was kidnapped after having been surveilled for many years. There were house break-ins, intimidation attempts. They followed him in many places, yet he was still kidnapped. And now I'm a victim of Pegasus. And I don't feel safe, and I have not seen anything that gives me the impression that I should feel safer. So is this what's going to happen to me next? Will I be kidnapped, tortured, and wrongfully detained in Rwanda? So that's a question for the Belgian authorities. But I hope and pray that they will continue to look closely at this and find solutions to keep me and my family safe, but also everyone that could be targeted by this spyware. Thank you.
Ms. Kanimba, please.
Merci, Madame Guillaume, pour cette question.
Thank you for your question. I still don't feel safe. What I recently noticed was that some Rwandan officials have been tracking me physically in Belgium. There hasn't been enough done to protect me or my family thus far. I'm really scared what might happen. This is an issue that, well, it's the intrusion, the meddling of the Rwandan government in the EU needs to be looked at a legal and a political level. There are many ties between Rwanda and the EU. And politically speaking, something can be done to show that what is happening can't happen. So that would help us to feel safe, but also make sure that they've got the message. Thus far, there haven't been legal remedies for me, even though we have lodged a complaint in Belgium. I don't know exactly what will happen. My hope is that there will be EU mechanisms created which will provide legal support and protection to victims, including myself. So I think it's a political issue, but ties between the EU and Rwanda need to be looked at again.
Thank you. There's also an opportunity to close our meeting.
Thank you, Madame Simoneau. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the members of the committee for inviting me to speak today. Today I have spoken about me and my family, but I also wanted to say that I'm speaking out because I don't want this to happen to anyone else. And I don't want anyone else to feel the way that I feel and the way that my family feels. This is all new. We are learning how to understand this technology, how to respond to it, but it is clear that steps have to be taken to stop states like Rwanda using this technology to target our citizens on our soil. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share my story and my father's story. And my whole family, in particular my father, is also grateful for all the efforts you have already done to push for his release and for the resolutions you have passed. And I hope that we will continue and we will continue to have your support to continue to advocate for his release and to pressure the Rwandan dictator to let him go. Thank you.